Rare earth elements underpin a silent part of modern civilization. They are not fuels like oil, nor are they popular metals like gold, copper, or lithium. Their value lies in very specific physical properties: intense magnetism, thermal resistance, fluorescence, conductivity, and an extraordinary capacity to enhance the performance of advanced technologies. They are present in electric motors, hard drives, radar, medical equipment, guidance systems, fiber optics, catalysts, batteries, displays, and wind turbines. Without them, many devices would still function, but they would be larger, less efficient, heavier, or simply impossible to manufacture with the same level of performance. The first mystery of rare earth elements lies in their very name. They aren't always rare in the sense of being scarce. Some of these elements are relatively widespread in the Earth's crust. Cerium, for example, is more abundant than copper. Neodymium, lanthanum, and yttrium appear in numerous mineral deposits. The real rarity lies in finding them concentrated, exploitable, and separable with sufficient efficiency. In most cases, they don't form pure veins or visible nuggets. They appear mixed with other elements, trapped in complex minerals, accompanied by iron, phosphorus, fluorine, carbon, thorium, or uranium. The complete list includes 17 elements, the 15 lanthanides, plus scandium and yttrium. Their names sound like they came from a secret table of the tech industry. Lanthanum, cerium, praseodymium, neodymium, promethium, samarium, europium, gadolinium, terbium, dysprosium, holmium, erbium, thulium, ytterbium, lutetium, scandium, and yttrium. In industrial practice, they don't all have the same value or demand. The most sought after are usually those that make high-performance permanent magnets possible, such as neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, and terbium. Others are important for catalysts, glass polishing, phosphors, lasers, specialty ceramics, and alloys. The massive process begins with geological exploration. Before excavating, specialists study maps, magnetic anomalies, surface samples, drill cores, and chemical analyses. They look for minerals such as bastnäsite, monazite, xenotime, ionic clays, or enriched apatites. Each deposit has a distinct character. Some are rich in light, rare earth elements such as lanthanum, cerium, and neodymium. Others contain higher proportions of heavy, rare earth elements such as dysprosium and terbium, which are much scarcer and more strategic. Once a deposit is confirmed, mining begins. In open-pit mines, giant excavators remove layers of rock and soil until the ore is reached. Heavy-duty trucks transport the material to primary crushers. There, the rock loses its original shape. Blocks weighing several tons are reduced to smaller fragments, then to gravel, then to coarse sand, and finally to fine powder. This grinding is crucial because the valuable particles are trapped within a mineral matrix. The finer the liberation, the more efficient the subsequent concentration can be. At this point, a ton of material may contain only a small fraction of rare earth oxides. The goal is not to obtain the pure element immediately, but to increase its concentration. Physical processes such as gravity separation, magnetic separation, and flotation are used for this purpose. Gravity separation takes advantage of density differences. Some minerals are heavier and behave differently on vibrating tables, spirals, or in water currents. Magnetic separation exploits the response of certain minerals to magnetic fields. Flotation uses chemical reagents that cause valuable particles to adhere to air bubbles and rise as foam, while other minerals sink. The industrial scene is intense. Agitated tanks, pumps, pipes, mineral slurries, particle-laden foam, filters, and conveyor belts. The ore ceases to resemble rock and becomes a technical pulp, a controlled mixture of water, particles, and reagents. From this pulp, a concentrate is obtained, much richer than the original material, but still far from the purity required by advanced industry. The difficulty is compounded because rare earth elements are very similar to one another. They occupy close positions on the periodic table and have similar chemical properties. This similarity, useful for certain applications, complicates the separation process. It is not enough to extract rare earths as a single unit. Industry needs neodymium almost separated from praseodymium, isolated dysprosium, purified terbium, lanthanum prepared for catalysts, or cerium intended for polishing. Each element has a different price, function, and supply chain. Furthermore, there is the environmental problem. Many rare earth minerals contain small amounts of thorium or uranium. This doesn't automatically turn the deposit into a nuclear mine, but it does necessitate the management of radioactive waste. Tailings, process water, and chemical sludge require control. Poor management can contaminate soils, rivers, and aquifers. Rare earth mining is not just a matter of technology, but also of permits, waste, communities, energy, water, and environmental monitoring. Therefore, the true value isn't just underground, it lies in processing capacity. A country may have reserves, but if it lacks facilities for concentration, separation, refining, metallurgy, and magnet manufacturing, it remains dependent on others. After physical concentration, the material still contains a complex mixture. It may appear as a brown, grayish, or yellowish powder. In industrial terms, it is a valuable but incomplete concentrate. To transform it into a strategic raw material, it must enter the most delicate phase, chemical separation. The process usually begins with a chemical attack stage. The concentrate is treated with strong acids or alkalis, depending on the type of mineral. Bastnäsite may undergo roasting and acid leaching. Monazite, which is more resistant and often associated with thorium, may require treatment with concentrated sulfuric acid or caustic soda at high temperatures. The goal is to break down the mineral structure and release the rare earth elements into a solution or compounds that can be purified. At this stage, the rock ceases to be rock. It becomes liquid chemistry. The elements pass into solutions charged with metal ions. Corrosion-resistant tanks, closed reactors, extraction systems, filter presses, acid neutralization, and strict pH control are all involved. Every variable matters: temperature, reaction time, reactant concentration, particle size, and mineral composition. The initial result is not a pure element, but a mixture of dissolved rare earths. Separating them is extremely difficult because their ionic radii and chemical behaviors are similar. This difficulty explains why refining is the industry's bottleneck. Mining rock can be expensive, but separating nearly identical elements on an industrial scale requires decades of expertise, enormous plants, and a precise chain of reagents. One of the most important methods is solvent extraction. In simple terms, the aqueous solution containing rare earths comes into contact with an organic solvent that contains molecules capable of selectively capturing certain elements. The two phases then separate, like oil and water. One element becomes more concentrated in one phase, while another remains more concentrated in the other. Single-stage separation is insufficient. That's why plants use hundreds or even thousands of successive contacts, with batteries of mixers, decanters, and repeated circuits. The picture is less spectacular than a giant mine, but far more strategic. Endless rows of tanks, pipes, and columns process solutions that slowly advance until small chemical differences result in actual separation. One circuit can enrich neodymium and praseodymium. Another can recover samarium. Another targets dysprosium or terbium. Each stream is adjusted and reprocessed until the required purity is achieved. Next comes precipitation. The separated elements are transformed into solid compounds, usually carbonates, oxalates, or hydroxides. These are then filtered, washed, dried, and calcined in furnaces to obtain rare earth oxides. These oxides are one of the key products in the market. They can be presented as high-purity fine powders: neodymium oxide, praseodymium oxide, lanthanum oxide, cerium oxide, dysprosium oxide, and terbium oxide. But the process doesn't end there. For many applications, the oxides must be converted into metals. Metallurgical reduction removes the oxygen and produces metallic elements or alloys. This step may involve high temperatures, molten salts, metallic calcium, fluoride, electrolysis, or specialized processes. The result is no longer a mineral powder, but a metal capable of being used in precision alloys. The manufacture of permanent magnets is one of the most valuable stages. Neodymium iron-boron magnets, known as End-Fe-B, are essential because they offer enormous magnetic force in a small volume. To improve their temperature resistance, small amounts of dysprosium or terbium are added. This combination allows for a more compact and powerful electric motor, a wind turbine to generate electricity more efficiently, or a hard drive to maintain accuracy in minimal dimensions. The production of these magnets requires its own process. First, alloys are prepared in precise proportions. Then the material is melted, solidified, and ground into a metallic powder. This powder is oriented in a magnetic field to align its internal domains. It is then compacted, sintered in high-temperature furnaces, and machined to precise tolerances. Finally, it receives protective coatings because neodymium magnets can oxidize. A single piece that fits in the palm of your hand can come from tons of rock, liters of reagents, and dozens of industrial operations. Other rare earth elements follow different paths. Cerium is used in polishing powders capable of leaving extremely smooth glass surfaces. Lanthanum is used in catalysts, nickel batteries, metal hydrides, and specialty glasses. Europium and terbium have been important in phosphors for displays and lighting. Gadolinium appears in medical and nuclear applications. Yttrium is used in ceramics, lasers, and advanced materials. Once rare earth elements are produced as oxides, metals, alloys, or magnets, they enter the global economy. There, their value ceases to be measured solely by the ton and begins to be measured by dependence. These materials may appear in small quantities within a final product, but their absence can bring entire factories to a standstill. A smartphone contains small amounts of rare earth elements in speakers, vibrators, cameras, screens, or circuits. A wind turbine may require permanent magnets to generate electricity efficiently. An electric vehicle may use neodymium magnets in its motor, especially when seeking high power, low weight, and good efficiency. A military aircraft, a submarine, a radar, or a guided missile may rely on samarium, cobalt, neodymium, dysprosium, yttrium, or terbium in critical components. In each case, the quantity may seem minimal, but the function is enormous. The rare earth economy functions like a layered network. The first layer is mining. The second is concentration. The third is separation. The fourth is conversion to metal and alloys. The fifth is the manufacture of magnets, catalysts, phosphors, or other components. The sixth is integration into finished products. The greatest power doesn't always lie with whoever extracts the most rock, but with whoever controls the most layers of the chain. For decades, China built a dominant position in that chain. It not only developed mines, but also refining, separation, metallurgy, magnet manufacturing, and technical expertise. This integration allowed it to lower costs, scale production, and become the world's processing hub. Other countries have resources, but often depend on external facilities to convert them into usable materials. This dependence has become a national security issue for the United States, Europe, Japan, India, Australia, and other industrialized economies. The reason is simple. Rare earths are not a luxury. They are a bottleneck. If there is a shortage of oil, energy prices rise. If there is a shortage of copper, cables, grids, and motors are delayed. A shortage of certain rare earth magnets could cripple electric cars, drones, turbines, industrial robots, medical equipment, and defense systems. The vulnerability lies not only in the volume, but also in the specialization. A manufacturer cannot easily replace a high-performance magnet with another material without redesigning the entire motor. That's why the industry has become geopolitical. Governments no longer see it as a simple mining chain, but as strategic infrastructure. New mines are financed, old projects are reopened, ionic clays are studied, separation plants are promoted outside of Asia, and alliances are sought among allied countries. Australia is developing projects to supply Western partners. The United States is trying to rebuild lost industrial capacity. Europe is seeking to reduce external dependence. India is promoting processing corridors. Japan has been investing in diversification and recycling for years. However, building an alternative supply chain is not quick. A mine can take many years to obtain permits, financing, environmental studies, and construction. A separation plant requires chemical expertise, waste management, and clients who guarantee demand. A magnet factory needs high-quality metal powder, furnaces, patents, microstructure control, and industrial buyers. The dependence created over decades cannot be dismantled in months. There is also an economic challenge. Rare earth prices are volatile. When they rise, many projects appear profitable. When they fall, some investments are frozen. Furthermore, not all elements are in equal demand. A deposit may produce a lot of cerium and lanthanum, but the market may need more neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, or terbium. This difference creates imbalances. Extracting one group of elements also means producing others that may have lower demand. The industry must sell the whole group, not just the most sought-after parts. Recycling appears to be a partial solution. Hard drive magnets, electric motors, turbines, headphones, and industrial equipment contain rare earth elements that can be recovered. The problem is collecting, disassembling, separating, and reprocessing them cost-effectively. Many products contain very small, dispersed, and difficult-to-extract quantities. In contrast, large industrial magnets or electric vehicle motors offer better opportunities. As the first mass-produced generation of electric cars and wind turbines grows, recycling could become even more important. Another path is substitution. Some companies are looking for motors without rare earths or with lower levels of critical elements. Designs based on induction, reluctance, or ferrites exist. New magnetic materials are also being researched. But substitution doesn't always mean improvement. Rare earth magnets still offer a combination that's hard to match: power, small size, efficiency, and stability. In sectors where weight and volume are critical, such as aviation, defense, or high-performance vehicles, that advantage remains enormous. The energy transition has increased the pressure. The electrification of transport, smart grids, robotics, automation, and wind power generation all require more critical materials. The paradox is profound. To reduce dependence on fossil fuels, the world is increasing its dependence on complex minerals. Oil is burned and disappears. Rare earths aren't consumed in the same way, but they become trapped in objects that must be manufactured, maintained, and ultimately recycled. The energy of the future doesn't eliminate mining, it reshapes it. The rare earth megaprocess reveals an uncomfortable truth. Behind clean technology, there is also mining, reagents, waste, furnaces, shipping, geopolitical competition, and enormous investments. An electric car can move without an exhaust pipe, but its motor may depend on a chain that begins in a remote mine and ends with a precision magnet. A turbine can generate renewable electricity, but its materials are born from intensive and carefully controlled processes. The multi-billion-dollar rare earth industry doesn't move the world because they are abundant in the final products. It moves it because they are at critical points in the system. They are small keys